Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Big Blue Banter, the podcast where me and my co-host, Nick Turchin, we try to break down the New York Giants from an NFL film standpoint, but also from a deeper standpoint with a deep look into the roster and everything that's unfolding. Obviously, last week we recapped the Browns game. You can find that on iTunes under Big Blue Banter or Spotify or Spreaker, wherever we have it, which seems to be everywhere now. But today, what we wanted to do is preview the Giants' second preseason game against the Detroit Lions this Friday night. They've been in Detroit now since Monday night. They started joint practices with the Lions on Tuesday and Wednesday. And we got a little special treat for you on today's show. While I haven't been able to make it out there to Detroit for the practices, we do have with us, who will join us later in the show, my good buddy and my colleague at 24/7 Sports, Max DeMara. He covers the Lions at 24/7 Sports, and I think at the very least you're going to like to hear him because he's going to bring a little bit of a different tone and accent to the podcast. Obviously, me and Nick have these heavy New York thick accents, and you're going to get to hear a little Midwest accent with Max, and he's got a strong one, so I can't wait to bring him on. But more importantly, he knows a lot about the Detroit Lions. He's been there at practice this week. He's going to tell us everything he's seen. But before we do that, me and Nick wanted to break down a few more things before we preview this Giants-Lions game at the end. We just want to talk a little bit more about what we didn't cover on the last podcast with regards to the Cleveland Browns' first preseason game. And one of the players we did not touch on, we promised we would, because a lot of people were talking to us about this on Twitter, at least me, about wanting to know how he did. It's Will Hernandez, the rookie second-round pick, the offensive guard, the guy expected to step in right away, be a day one, week one starter, and an above average one at that. Nick, obviously, Will Hernandez graded out subpar from Pro Football Focus. You know, whether people want to take PFF as the gospel is their decision or not. But at the same time, when I went back and rewatched the game, I decided on offense to focus on him. Obviously, I didn't have time to watch every single player on every single snap, but I wanted to focus on one player, and it was Hernandez. To me, it seemed like he pretty much had just as many positive as negative plays. Not the greatest debut in my mind. Nick, what did you see?
Saw a couple of things. Yeah, I think it was a lot of good and some bad, kind of what you're saying. A couple of the good things. Really liked his, for a player of his size, really like his footwork, and this is coming out of college, guys. We're talking about this. Really good footwork, light feet, able to get to the second level pretty well. Pretty good. What I saw specifically on last Thursday was a pretty good hand placement. Really good use of hands. Really like to see him kind of getting out on both in power blocks as well as down blocks. Really liked, actually, one of the things I really liked was his ability to sell the screen on a play that actually was blown dead, where he traveled really well to the second level against a guy, Michael Kendricks, who's much more athletic than he was. So it showed that he was an athlete in space, and for a bigger guy, this was definitely almost a question mark of his, I think, coming out of UTEP. I liked his ability to stay with blocks and fight through things. One play that guys mentioned was an outside zone to the right side that where he actually had a really tough assignment to block the inside 2-eye technique defensive tackle. I forget the guy's name on Cleveland. But anyway, he rode the guy as hard as he could laterally, and he ended up at Barkley's feet, and many people kind of thought it was basically a bad thing and a blown assignment or a missed block, but basically he did what he could when he was beaten, and he finished real strong, putting his guy on the ground. And what really derailed that play was actually Eric Flowers on blocking the edge on the play side of the play. So anyway,
I hate to hear that.
Yeah, right, and that was one of those things. It's like, yeah, do we want to go in and start dogging him again? I mean, no. I mean, we know it's a work in progress. So that's what I saw from that play. It wasn't really kind of a massive issue. A couple things in pass pro. I know a bunch of guys were talking about that. He's a little sluggish. Things that he struggles with. He's a little sluggish to his right side, which Jalapio was as well. I think it's going to be their play speed is going to increase as their snaps increase overall. That's across the board for everybody too. I think that he didn't reset his feet as well as he wanted to in some blocks. Kind of got pushed around a touch and pass on some levels, but when he's good, his stance is very good, whether he's sliding to his left with help or on his own, and really uses those good long arms in a good way. Again, good use of hands. And so I really liked his potential in pass pro to get even better, and I think his overall comfortability to get better. And what I'm looking for specifically this game is as he gets more comfortable, you're going to see his finishes become much more violent, and it'll equate more to what we saw in the college film from UTEP.
No doubt. And speaking, of violent finishes, there's actually a play that I read about from Tuesday's joint practice with the Lions where basically a counter. It seems like a counter power play where Hernandez supposedly, and we're going to ask Max about it if he got a chance to see it from his vantage point at practice, but supposedly, perfectly took Ziggy Ansah out of the play and created a massive hole for Wayne Gallman, who's been getting more work now with Saquon Barkley down, to burst through. So we're going to ask Max if he saw that, but that's what you're saying. Those violent blocks that we saw so often on his tape at UTEP. That's what we want to see with the Giants. That's what we want to see, his ability to open up holes for the running game. And again, guys, let's not totally jump on Hernandez's back for an up and down game because he only played 14 snaps. The starters weren't on the field very much, and I think from what Nick just broke down, we saw enough flashes of big time potential that these little mistakes and some of the blocks that maybe he missed, he can improve on and execute later. And we're going to dive into one more topic that we didn't feel like we covered enough. And again, we're not here to bash Davis Webb. Obviously, me and Nick on the last podcast have made it pretty known we weren't a huge fan of his college game tape at Cal. We think there's some tools to work with, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I know a lot of people thought we might have been a little too harsh on him in the last podcast, but I want to touch on maybe more of an upside, more of a rosier topic, and that's Kyle Lauletta, who both me and Nick like what we saw from in the first game. Actually, Nick posted a clip on Twitter recently of what was my favorite play from Lauletta, which was I believe you can break it down in the technical terms of it. It's like a play-action gun play where he kind of worked through his reads fast and got the ball out quick on time to the outside receiver, giving him, which is in my opinion one of the most important traits, room to run after the catch. And after the ball was placed in a great spot, the receiver created another 6 yards after the catch on what was just honestly just a basic hitch route where the ball I've seen thrown so many times by both Eli and other quarterbacks to the point where there was no yards after the catch. And that's not a knock on Eli. Obviously things are harder in live game action against first team defenses. But the point is, I liked what I saw. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you saw when you kind of took a deeper dive into Lauletta's first game?
Yeah, he didn't have a ton of throws, but again, I saw a few good things. The play you described was it was a cover 2 coverage, and he's throwing very quickly to the turkey hole. And the turkey hole in cover 2, for those that kind of aren't familiar, it's the area beyond the cornerback if the cornerback's sitting down in the flat, and to the outside of the safety over the top. And it's kind of a spot that's tricky to hit because the safety's basically ready to jump on that. They know that's where their weak spot is, and you kind of have to time it. You have to either have a good timing to get in there or have basically good enough arm strength, or in the case of Lauletta, have good enough play speed to get the whole shooting match over there into that turkey hole as quick as possible. And that's what this throw demanded. So for those that kind of want to step in and say, hey, he doesn't have the arm strength, it's like, okay, well, it was roughly a 12 to 13-yard route, I want to say. It wasn't that far down the field, but you're seeing good accuracy and good placement where the guys can then, as you said, the receiver can then do something after the catch. He's not stretched to concentrate extra hard to make the catch and then have to deal with everything else in the world of football in the playing field there. So I really like that example. I liked his ability to control the safeties with his eyes, his attention to detail. But again, most of all, and I mentioned this in the last podcast, I think it's his footwork. His footwork drives his timing, and those traits, that's what Shurmur is looking for to start off with for any quarterback in this system. So I think that's where the fit is the most. Things, though, more importantly, almost, I think, to shift this time around, we know he's not necessarily getting more reps, I don't think, in practice. So what he has to kind of compete for and get better at, I think, is additional improvements in mental processing to both the blitz as well as pocket awareness. He has to kind of get a little better at what we call throwing through trash when guys are kind of in his face or there's hands in the throwing lanes getting the ball through there. He had a higher number of balls tipped in college, I think, in the most recent season. So looking to see if he can change arm angles and find those avenues, those ways to distribute the ball quickly to his receivers at the NFL level. And again, this is something that it's just like any player. It's difficult to grade everything in the preseason, but you can definitely see this as reps, and I'm definitely focusing on these things for Friday night.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me, especially because, you know what, you talked about Lauletta, and there's a difference, and I learned this more in depth, and even though it's something I kind of had an idea about before, but I had a chance to talk with Trent Dilfer, who, say what you want about him as an NFL quarterback, but he's a great analyst. He knows quarterbacks, and I had a chance to interview him earlier this offseason because I wanted to know about the draft class, because at the time I thought it was pretty locked and loaded. The Giants were going to get one of those quarterbacks at the top. And what he told me, which was really interesting, is that in his opinion there's such a stark contrast between arm talent and arm strength. And what he likes to call arm talent is not arm strength. So maybe Lauletta doesn't have the biggest arm, but arm talent, which is more important to Dilfer, he says light years more important, is the ability to change the trajectory of your throws based on, the way you position your arm. And it's the ability to get the ball out on time, but also place it in spots, like you said, to give the receivers a lot of room after the catch. And that's what I saw from Lauletta when I watched him at Richmond, a guy who can get the ball out with good trajectory, especially in the red zone, where he was the most accurate quarterback during red zone drills at the Combine, actually. Pro Football Focus charted all the quarterbacks, and he was the best in the red zone. And that's what we saw a lot on, because he's got really good ball placement, really good trajectory on his passes, good arm talent, and he's calm in the pocket and he's poised. We saw a play, I didn't see it. I'm going to ask Max about this too when we get the chance to see if he got an eyes on it. But I read today during the final team drills in a situational 2-minute drill, Lauletta was faced with a 2nd and long. He worked his way through all the progressions. No one was open. It was great coverage. He decided to tuck the ball under and run for the first down that kept the drive alive. And here, he can do that. He has more pocket mobility than you'd expect. Somebody who played lacrosse in his past and has a little bit of agility, mobility, tested decently well at the Combine there. So I'm going to look to see more of that on Friday. And you say he hasn't gotten as many upcrease in reps, which is partially true, but actually the Giants have scaled until the past few days, had scaled back Eli Manning's reps a little to give both those guys a little more action. And a lot of people think he has an actual shot now to beat out Davis Webb, which I do as well. But anyway, we'll talk a little bit more Webb, talk a little bit more everyone. But I wanted to get to this part of the show because I'm actually really excited for it. This is actually me and Nick's first guest on Big Blue Banter. We've done now, what is this, our 7th podcast, Nick?
I think so, yeah, that's right.
Podcast number 7. This is our first guest. That's going to change because we're going to try to get more guests on as the season goes and different matchups arise with the Giants. We're also going to try to work in some more fan segments, which we'll get to at the end. But I'm definitely honored that my buddy and colleague for 24/7 Sports, Max DeMara, is with us. I believe he's just joined us on the other line. How you doing, Max?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, guys. I'm glad to be your first guest. I'm honored to be your first guest. It's really cool to hop on with you guys and talk some Lions football, some Giants football, and nice to see these two teams really get it going on the field again after they played the regular season last year. Really cool.
Yeah, no doubt, Max. And, after practice day, Pat Shurmur, Giants head coach, said, I've really been so impressed with the professionalism of both these teams. And you look around the league, and there seems to be a fight at every single joint practice session, but this one. And it doesn't mean they're not playing physical, because I bet you can attest to it. It's some pretty physical football out there, am I right?
Yeah, and actually that's kind of been my biggest takeaway, I think, from this whole thing is really the professionalism and how great to see. Not only, Pat Shurmur, a guy who's, by the way, I have to drop it. He's from the Detroit area. He's from right in my hometown of Dearborn, Michigan. Actually went to Michigan State like I did. So I have a lot in common with Pat Shurmur. I've always respected him as not just a football mind, but as a player, a coach, everything. And of course, Matt Patricia as well. Both these guys are all about football. They're not about any nonsense. And you've seen it. They've been able to do it, which I've been so impressed by. Like we saw, the Jets and the Redskins fighting, and it get real physical and chippy and nasty. I mean, you're not getting anything done when that kind of stuff happens. And how nice that the Lions and Giants have gone out there and have really competed, have gotten better, I think, in key ways, both sides. I saw some improvement from the Lions' defensive line, which I really wanted to see. And, of course, they've had some moments. There was a little bit of chippiness today. Lions player on the special teams drill went down, and the Giants guy was slugging him a few times. The Giants sideline loved it. But the coaches came in, they blew the whistle, and that was dead. So, just great to see that at camp. Great to see a camp with class, with professionalism. And that's what you want to see this time of year, because if there's all the other stuff is going on, you're not getting better. You're not improving in between the lines. And, how great that those coaches were able to kind of come together, set the ground rules. We saw the Lions and Raiders last week kind of do a similar thing with John Gruden and Matt Patricia. But there was a little chippiness there as well. But I really have liked the professionalism I've seen between both these sides this week. It's really been paramount to watch in camp.
Yeah, that's awesome, Max. And you know what else has taken kind of center stage? It's been the matchup in individual drills and full team drills between Odell Beckham Jr. and Darius Slay. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen between those two during the joint practices so far?
Well, really, I think what Slay said yesterday about Odell not losing his step, really being a guy that's not going to lose his step till he gets to be 50 years old, which I thought was a really great comment by Darius Slay, who's always full of great comments for the media. But I saw it. I mean, you talk about Odell Beckham. I've been struck by watching him this weekend. First time I've really seen him up close and personal, and I've really enjoyed watching him. I mean, he makes the tough catch look so easy. And in Detroit, it's a lot like Calvin Johnson used to do, you know. You just go through his progressions, and there he is. He's always making the big plays, always making the tough catch look easy. So I give Odell Beckham a lot of credit for that. And he performed well against Lauletta yesterday. We really didn't see a whole lot of this. It's not materialized in the way that some people hope, where they're just going against each other every single time.
Right.
And they've done other things, obviously, on the field, working other progressions, other plays in. But the time we did see, Slay got a few. And I think Odell got a few yesterday. Got in the end zone against him, and he's shaking him with some really good moves. I really like what I've seen out of his agility. He looks healthy to me. He looks healthy. He looks ready to come back, and I think that bodes well for the Giants. I think they're going to get a great season out of Odell Beckham if he is matching up well against the Darius Slay, who obviously we know last year 8 interceptions. I mean, lockdown. The stats were crazy. He locked down some of the top guys in the game. Antonio Brown, of course, Odell when he played the Giants. I mean, there was a whole laundry list of guys that he played head-to-head and went against and just locked down, pretty much shut out of the game. If Odell is doing that in practice and you're seeing those signs, I think that's a really good sign for Giants fans. I think you're going to like where he's headed this season. And that, as we said, you know, based on that work against Slay, can make him even better and can kind of get his season off to the right start here, which is really good early on for the Giants.
Yeah, no doubt, Max. And, yeah, you said it best. I mean, Slay has had his fair share of success against Odell Beckham when you consider it relative to other cornerbacks. 2 games against Beckham, he's allowed 10 receptions for 100 yards, which is actually a really good – against Odell Beckham, those are good numbers. But let's keep in mind, of course, Beckham's matchup against Slay last season came in his first game back after the preseason ankle injury. But I digress. Anyway, I wanted to know another thing going on at practice that I've been seeing catch some buzz in recent days, actually more so today. And it's the matchup when the Lions shift over Ziggy Ansah to the opposite side of the formation and match him up against Eric Flowers. I was reading that today. Flowers had a lot of trouble with Ansah, and obviously any Giants fan who's followed this team for more than 12 months remembers the game last season, this week 2, when Ziggy Ansah absolutely manhandled Eric Flowers, took over the game, in my opinion, and really won that for the Lions. So how's that matchup been in general? How's the Giants' offensive line held up against a pretty damn solid Detroit Lions defensive line?
You know, I think it's interesting. Flowers, you bring up Ansah's game against him last year, and I think we saw Flowers also struggle today, also against Devon Kennard, who actually was no stranger to Giants fans, a guy that the Giants let go this offseason. Lions picked him up in free agency, and they're kind of working him in as kind of I don't want to say a pass rush specialist, but he's a guy that's really going to play a new pass rush role in this Matt Patricia hybrid defense the Lions are going to be running. So we saw Kennard get 2 sacks today, and he victimized, one of them came against Flowers, and that kind of, it's deja vu for me, like you said, with that game against Ansah. I mean, I think the Giants' offensive line is matched up well enough. I mean, if there's a question about the Lions' defensive front, it is the depth. Can these guys, all perform up to the right level? Can they kind of figure this out? This is a complex defense Matt Patricia's installing. It's a lot of verbiage. It's a lot of thinking. It's a lot of terms. And they struggled week 1, I thought, against the Raiders. And we've seen signs. I saw signs today. I think they're kind of getting it. They're coming back up. I like them in run defense today. They performed well, I thought, with that. But, Flowers is a guy who, when he does go against, it seems like that Ansah battle is a bad one. He struggled against him, of course, yesterday. And for whatever reason, it's just there's certain guys, as baseball fans know, there's certain pitchers that that don't have a good matchup against a certain hitter. They always get them, it seems, every time you watch. And it just seems like Flowers doesn't have that with going with Ansah. It's interesting because Ansah is actually, I think, one of the keys to this Lions front this year is health. As you said, in that game, you kind of saw flashes of what he could be. And it's going to be interesting to see if he can do that consistently this year and stay healthy. That was kind of his best game of the year, ironically enough, for the Lions, was that game. So, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays in. Of course, how Kennard can kind of help that as well, given he's come over from the Giants this offseason.
Yeah. And you know what else I was wondering about, Max? That was interesting to me. It seems like from what I've read from these 2 practices, it's been pretty even with the first-team offenses versus the first-team defenses. Have you seen that, anyone's taking, more of a majority winning in these 11-on-11 full-team drills? Do you think that, for example, has the Lions' first-team offense stood out to you against the Giants' first-team defense or vice versa?
I think, like you said, it's been pretty even. I haven't really been able to put a finger on it and say, hey, here's a clear winner. Eli Manning was intercepted today by Glover Quinn. I mean, he was sacked a couple times, theoretically by Kennard. But, you can't really read into that. The Giants have made plays as well. They've gotten it going. I mean, like you said, I really like Wayne Gallman. He showed me a lot from the Giants' perspective. I think he's, I liked him coming out of Clemson. But after watching him now with some NFL experience under his belt, I really like what he's going to do as well. I think, it's so hard to judge at these things because they go against each other. There's always guys coming in and out. There's always second-teamers coming in, and, they're rotating so crazy fast. It's hard to kind of call one side a winner. I think really it sounds cliche to say it, right? And it sounds kind of silly, but I think both sides are going to come out of this the winner because, anytime you get a chance, if you're like a Slay to go against Odell Beckham, anytime you're, a guy like Will Hernandez going against some of these Lions linemen and Ansa, some of these looks that they're going to show with Matt Patricia, how can you not gain from that and gain from that experience and gain from that tape, which they'll have now to kind of try to figure this out. So, I think the whole thing is going to kind of benefit. Everybody's going to get benefited from this equally, and I'm really excited to kind of see what it does for both teams because I really think it will help them. Of course, coming out of this preseason game, to see kind of where it launches them if they're able to kind of get off to a good start this season because of the work they did so closely here in camp and the professional work, as we said, that's really gone on in Allen Park so far.
Yeah, Max, I think what you just said right there was an incredible, excellent point that we haven't touched on that's really important, and it's that, in past years, all the years under McAdoo and most of the final years under Coughlin, the Giants didn't do these joint practices. But what it does allow them, as Max just illustrated so more importantly, is that it gives them game tape on another team. And as Eli Manning said today, after practice, he said it gives us different looks as a quarterback, different coverages, different defensive schemes. And Eli Apple, on the flip side, said it's a big advantage for us to see the ball come out of Matthew Stafford's hand, the way he throws the ball, versus what we've seen, which is the same quarterbacks over and over. So it really just gives the team different looks, more game tape to work with. And for that reason alone, I'm happy the Giants are getting back to doing this under Shermer. I'm disappointed they hadn't been doing these joint practices in the past, but, gladly things have changed. I was going to ask you, Max, if any Giants players really stood out, caught your attention, but it seems like you kind of jumped the gun there, which is great, and you got it down with Wayne Gallman, who's a guy who, I'm really excited for this season. I like what I've seen pretty much every snap he's had since he's got to the Giants. But I want to leave on this note, and before I jump into, actually, we'll leave it with you giving your final thoughts. But first, I want to ask you one more question, a little bit of a preview question, Max. And that would be, what do you expect to see on Friday night after watching these two practices from the Lions? Do you think they're going to – because obviously we know in the first preseason games, teams don't really game plan. They don't put much together. But in the second preseason game, they start to, give a few more looks on offense, a few more different looks that, they plan to use in the regular season on defense. And that's something even Pat Shermer said the Giants will be doing in the preseason second game. So I'm just asking, for a Giants fan's sake, do you expect to see anything new and interesting from either a player personnel standpoint or formation, anything like that on Friday night from the Lions?
Well, I think they'll open it up a little bit more. I mean, we didn't see a whole lot. I mean, of course, like you said, Oakland, it was kind of a vanilla game plan. They really didn't – and Matthew Stafford didn't even take snaps. A lot of the starters didn't take snaps. We really didn't get to see a whole lot that really would help you gauge where they're at, gauge what they might want to do. But I think this week you're going to see more Kerryon Johnson, I think, for example, is a great thing for Giants fans to watch. Where the Lions get him in, the type of things they do with him. Do they give him more looks early on, kind of as the lead dog back, so to speak? I think he earned it with his great performance against Oakland. Kind of the buzz of the NFL was kind of Kerryon Johnson coming on here as a really strong running back for a Lions running attack that needs that type of guy, that type of dynamic for their team. So, I think you're going to see a little bit of that. I think you're going to see a little bit more creativity offensive. You're going to see a few more things. I still think you're going to see him be careful. I mean, this is a Bill Belichick disciple here, Matt. You're going to see lockdown. You're not going to see much in the way of anything special, crazy, or anything like that. I think for me, it's more player usage. The type of players they put on the field in what situations, especially with running back, especially with some of these position battles. The Lions have tight end. See if they can work some more of those guys, and there's some more looks in there for those guys. I think that's kind of what you're going to see. They're not going to give a whole lot away because, Matt Patricia, he won't give anything away, whether it's a press conference, whether it's a game. He's certainly not going to give it away in a game if he won't give anything away in a press conference. But I am really excited for that game. And to your point about the joint practices, it's ironic that you brought up McAdoo and the Giants not doing that because what I saw was the Lions never did that under Jim Caldwell. They did not have that previous. They didn't have it in previous regimes. Caldwell brought it only when Bob Quinn did from New England. They had used it successfully there. And the last 2 years, the Lions have done it. And you know what? They did it against the Steelers a couple years back, and last year was against the Colts. And really, I don't think it's an accident that the Lions, despite all their problems that they had, were able to finish 9-7 the last couple of years, 18 wins, make the playoffs one year, kind of be on the doorstep of it last year, even though they weren't able to get over the hump. But I don't think it was by accident. I think that preparation preseason, in addition to the preseason, doing that extra work really helps out. And I think that's something that Giants fans will notice this year. I think it goes a long way towards helping the professionalism, helping the attitude, the mindset of a team, giving them confidence. And I think that's really what you're going to see here. So I've already noticed it as it relates to the Lions bringing that in. I think Giants fans are going to notice that this year as well when they get a chance to get off of this, look at the tape, and improve some of the things that they've seen here in Detroit. So I think it's a win-win. Giants-Lions, I think it's huge for the Giants to start this again, and it's good news for them.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Max. I mean, again, like you even said, this is a Lions team that's won 18 games in the last 2 seasons. This is a good roster. This is a good team. They're headed in the right direction from a coaching standpoint. They have Matthew Stafford, who I think is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the NFL. So the Giants can compete with them and hold their own like they have these 2 practices. It's a pretty good sign of what we might see in the regular season. And I'm really glad you actually took the time to mention my boy Kerryon Johnson. As Max knows, I've been hitting him up all day for the past week about Kerryon Johnson. I love Kerryon Johnson. I want him to be a fantasy football hit. I don't know if it's going to happen because, of course, Amir Abdul is somehow rearing his ugly head again, getting first-team snaps. But Garrett Blunt's probably going to take the goal line stuff. And they still got Riddick for third down, but I don't care. I watched Kerryon Johnson. That 3rd-and-1 cut he made in the open field was so pretty. This is one of the smoothest runners I've seen. He has people, compared to Le'Veon Bell. I didn't totally see it in college, but on that run in the preseason against the Raiders where he cut in the open field, I said, how the hell did he create space with that angle? And that's the type of stuff that really stands out to me. So from a fan standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint, I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. But other than that, Max, I really appreciate you taking the time today to share your thoughts. And before we let you go, do you want to add anything else, or do you want to just sign off or tell people where they can follow your work?
Well, for sure. I do want to make one quick point about Odell Beckham.
Oh, keep going.
Watched him a couple days now in practice. Of course, today I had a chance to get really close to the field, kind of be right in the action. And Odell Beckham, the kids are all yelling for him. They want him to sign autographs. And this is whether or not you're a Giants fan or a Lions fan. Everybody kind of captivated by this guy because he makes that one-handed catch. We know he's crazy with the things he does, and he's a showman. He's a guy that does it at the greatest level. So, you would think he's a guy that would kind of blow off the fans or, it kind of, just disappeared in the locker room. But I really thought it was special. He came in, and he's not going to sit there and sign every autograph because he can't. I mean, you don't blame him for that because he can. Everybody's going to crowd around him. But what he did do, I thought was really cool. He did a lap around the side of the practice field with all the fans, slapping fives with kids, slapping fives with adults, slapping fives with whoever would throw out their hand. And it's really cool to see that. And you know what? I've seen a different side of Odell Beckham. I think the media sometimes, you see him and he's kind of portrayed differently in the media. He's kind of portrayed as a bad guy type sometimes. But really, in watching him interact with the players, of course, he's good friends with Darius Slay, who he battles with all the time, hanging out with his kids, playing around in the field. It's really special to watch. So, I think Odell Beckham, a lot of people that aren't Giants fans that kind of watch him from afar are tempted to kind of paint him with a negative brush. But I'm not going to do that. I think one of my biggest takeaways from this is how cool of a guy he is, how good of a guy he is, and how he really does give back to the fans and how he really does kind of take that seriously. So I think that's really cool, and that's something that the Giants fans can be proud of. He may get in the headlines from time to time for the dog peeing and all that. But you know what? I mean, I think at the end of the day, he's a good guy, and it's somebody you wouldn't mind rooting for on your side, not just because of the great catches, but because of the off-the-field stuff, and of course, what he does for the fans as well. So that's definitely cool. As an aside, you can always follow me. If any Lions fans are out there in Giants country and happen to like the Lions or Giants, you can follow me on Twitter at SportsGuyTheMax. I'm there all the time posting Lions links, of course, Detroit Lions on 24/7 Sports. As Dan knows, I'm on the Lions site all day, and getting everything taken care of. So that's kind of my closing statement here. And I was honored to be your first guest of the podcast, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Max, you were awesome. Thanks again for stopping in.
Thanks a lot.
We'll definitely do this again when the Giants match up against the Lions next.
For sure, guys. I'll be looking forward to it. We'll talk to you again then.
All right. Thanks again, Max. And that was Max DeMara of Lions on 24/7 Sports. Definitely check him out, at least up until this game for sure. Check out what you can learn from him on this matchup. Again, like I said, he's at practice, so he's got the insight. But anyway, now we're going back into a little more Giants talk here. Not matchup, but what we're looking forward to in the preseason week 2 between Nick, what me and Nick are looking forward to specifically. And first, we wanted to kind of touch on an under-the-radar guy you probably haven't heard much about, and that's A.J. Francis, defensive lineman for the Giants. They signed him from the Redskins. Has a really interesting backstory as somebody who was drafted in 2014 and hasn't really made much noise until now. But what we've been seeing from him in training camp practices and then that preseason opener is interesting. He's a guy who we've seen some flashes as a pass rusher out of that. Remember, we've been looking for somebody to come in as the sub-package, 3-technique defensive end on passing downs. Me and Nick talked on one of the early podcasts, so we thought that could be R.J. McIntosh, the rookie. Well, McIntosh hasn't practiced yet. Pat Shurmur says it's a slow and long rehab process. He's starting to look out of the picture for 2018. But what I wanted to know, Nick, based on what you've seen, can you envision Francis maybe taking over in this role and then making the roster because of it?
So yeah, I think he's a guy who flashes in a little bit of a different way versus the 3-tech. Right off the bat, he's a guy who's 6'5", who's 337. He's one of the larger guys on the field. Period. So a guy with that type of size. He was used in by the Redskins in early downs, kind of as a first and second down, 1-tech and 2-tech guy type of player. When they ran 2-techs, that's basically 2 defensive tackles that are over the guards. When they ran that type of front, he wasn't featured that much, but he was featured when they were running a 1-tech closer to the center. So for me, I actually see him more as a potential speller for Snacks Harrison.
Oh, for Snacks.
Yeah, just because of the profile and what you see with him is a guy that's got a fair amount of functional strength. He's going to be able to win with his size a lot. He's going to be able to get in holes where you do see him kind of fall down a little bit, which is why I think he's had a little bit of a tough time kind of getting going and with his career. Is momentum wise, he's not super agile. He's not going to have a lot of change of direction. He's not going to be able to basically what you see on tape is when he gets going in a direction, he's not going to be able to come back, and that's actually. The more I watch his tape, it's amazing to contrast it with Snacks, who's just like, he looks like he's 220 pounds at times, then he looks like he's 3, at whatever he is at other times, because he's unbelievably agile. And so anyway, but what I liked is I like him as a good backup to have that, for that 1-tech and 0-tech backup role for Snacks. And that was a big area for the Giants last year. When Snacks wasn't on the field, they had a lot of issues in the run game and the run defense. I think they want to shore that up because Snacks is going to play, I think, longer stretches where he doesn't come off the field on third down right away. I think they're going to leave him on to give him some good pass rush reps and for him to kind of improve that side of his game. And so I think he'll go series where he's not on. And when he's not on, you want guys like him, guys like B.J. Hill, guys like, guys that are farther down the depth chart to really be able to come in on the interior. We know that B.J. Hill may be playing on the exterior of their base, but be able to swap in on those parts and be one of those pieces. And I think I actually do think A.J. Francis will make the team.
That's interesting, especially when you consider the depth they have on that defensive line. Guys like Robert Thomas, who actually flashed a bit as well with his big sack of Baker Mayfield in the first preseason game. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that. A few other players I wanted to profile who I'm really looking forward to seeing in this second preseason game. We'll start with Wayne Gallman, a player who, to me, should be the number 2 back on this Giants roster when all is said and done. I don't hate Jonathan Stewart. I don't want to be that guy. He's actually been a little bit more elusive than people realize, especially over the last 6 years. It's obviously been a little less over the last 2 years. He's creating a few less forced missed tackles, a few less yards per carry after attempt, but at the same time, Gallman's a guy who I rewatched the game and I saw a lot of bursts on his few touches. He gets the ball and it's like every play he wants to take to the house. But he's not overbearing with it because he does good vision, good cuts, good quick inside moves. He's gotten a lot of action this week with Barkley's sideline. Obviously, Saquon Barkley has been out of practice since Tuesday, injured his hamstring during Monday's practice on a awesome ball from Kyle Lauletta over the top on a wheel route where Barkley beat Janoris Jenkins. I just want to repeat that. He beat Janoris Jenkins on a wheel route. The ball it wasn't perfect. It was perfect. Barkley doesn't get hurt. It was a little bit to the point where Barkley had to outstretch his arms completely, and that kind of just slowed down his momentum in his legs to a point where he may have it looks like he tweaked his hamstring, and he's been out the past 2 days. And that's meant a lot more reps for Wayne Gallman. We talked earlier on the podcast about the big play he made behind Will Hernandez on the counter, but he's been making plays throughout practice, as Max said. Max pointed him out as a guy, and Max, our Lions on 24/7 sports writer, pointed him out as a guy who stood out to him. Practice. What are you looking forward to seeing from Gallman in the second preseason game when he's sure to get a lot more action?
Yeah, I think one thing that really stands out when you watch his tape from last year, and this is going to put him in competition, like we're talking about with Stewart, and contrast him from Stewart, is his versatility. He runs well in both gap schemes, which we're talking about, man schemes, man blocking, and as well in zone schemes. And it is a little weird, a little odd to see, a little unique, I should say, not weird, to see a running back that can do that on both levels. And what I see is that he's very patient and has, like you said, kind of good vision, especially for a guy this young, he's in his second year. And one of the bigger things that I like was his ability to set up blockers and, like I said, his ability to have patience to then have pretty good burst after a couple strides to get through the line. A couple of the bigger runs last year were on some power runs where he really kind of had a very good second level read to get to the third level with good burst there. So he has kind of the home run potential, but then almost just as important, when I saw him running zone, he has that ability where he keeps his legs churning through the hole and he kind of finds ways to fall forward consistently. And so with a guy with his size, he's 6 foot 210. He weighed in at the combine at 215, so he's like 210ish, but he's got a good frame, and that's going to generate a lot of yards. And it's where he struggles a little bit, I would say almost, is he doesn't bounce it to the outside that quickly. He's got very good shifty moves in medium amounts of space, meaning he can, in the hole, he can kind of do a few more things than people realize. But he contrasts to Barkley that he's not looking for that home run all the time. So I do see him kind of falling into the second, that number 2 spot, not as like the thunder and lightning type, contrast, but just really as someone who can produce good yards for them. And the versatility and scheme is a big uptick over Jonathan Stewart. Again, not to knock him, but he is much more of a gap scheme runner. And I think one of his fallouts, one of the issues in Carolina, was that they stopped running a lot of their gap schemes at the earlier part of last year. I think that was what kind of stalled their running game, and that changed toward the end of the season. But for him, he wasn't, as he aged, he wasn't evolving into multiple schemes. So I think that's going to be something right off the bat with Gallman. You're going to have a step up. As well in the screen game, Gallman, for a young player, he's got really good spatial awareness. He's got good footwork after contact. He catches the ball well. It's something that he's definitely focused on this offseason because his practice tape and this preseason tape showed that as well. So you're seeing a younger player in a different stage of his career get better. I definitely see him, maybe not right off the bat getting the number 2 spot, but within a very, very short amount of time having that spot as his own.
Yeah, it's interesting also because, like you said, you broke it down perfectly what makes him an interesting and unique running back prospect. And at Clemson, he averaged 3.5 yards per carry after first contact, which was something that stood out to me during last year's draft process. I like him a lot. I think Gallman has proven he can also be a factor in the passing game. And, while Stewart may have the edge on him now, I see Gallman winning that battle when all is said and done. I'm also going to be looking forward to in this game, and I know you touched on, you told me about this when we talked before the podcast, what Curtis Riley can do. Because listen, Darian Thompson, he's out with a hamstring injury. He suffered it during the last preseason game. Hasn't practiced since. Riley, listed number 1 on the depth chart of free safety, has been practicing since recovering from that hamstring injury for the last week or since Sunday. And he will be starting on Friday night, most likely. What are you looking forward to from Riley? What do we need to see? Can he stand out right away and kind of take hold of this job?
Yeah, I think it's his background as a cornerback immediately gets into, can his range prove in it? Can he prove his range in a game setting? Can he prove his range with his mental processing of reading the quarterback and reacting? Don't want to jump down Darian Thompson's into his issues, but you still see some false steps from Darian Thompson, some reads where he's not kind of basically moving to the side of the ball as quickly as he should. So, and now that he's injured, obviously the whole thing is kind of up for grabs. So that's what you want to see from just the ability to basically have a chance to get a pass deflection. It's very hard to grade free safeties because if you're playing a lot of man free, which is cover 1, where he's that one deep zone defender, if you want to call him that, in the middle of the field, he often doesn't get to the balls, to the fade routes, to the seam routes, to the out routes. But it's what he does, in making up for that, and getting as close to the play as he can, that can really add help to his man defenders. And we have seen that with the Giants secondary. They need that help. So I do think this is kind of a crucial position for them, and we'll see if he can do that.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what he can bring to the table as well in the second preseason game. Did we want to dive into any quarterback talk? Do you think we got into that a little? I think what we'll expect to see is more action from Eli Manning. I think he's going to play almost the entire quarter, and then I think they'll kind of divvy up the rest of the game between Webb and Lauletta. Maybe get Tanny another series or two. What are you looking forward to there? Is there anything more you want to add?
No, I think it's we all know that what Webb's improvements people have a beat on what Webb's improvements kind of should be and would be, and I think you're going to look into to see if his timing is improved and his arm angles maybe a little bit, to see if he's maybe losing some of the bad habits at least, and just overall accuracy kind of the key there, and to be able to deliver that ball on time, that's kind of the basic starting place, and I think he'll get there. Maybe not this week, but maybe over the course of this preseason. That's what this is all about. I think you're right on Eli. I think Eli wants to put a few balls in the end zone. I think that's kind of, I think he's a competitor, and I think all these guys know this is the preseason. But at the same time, I think he wants to find guys like Cody Latimer. I think they want to run that corner route in the red zone. I think he wants to show hey, he has multiple targets, and kind of instill a little bit of fear in this division that's that is going to be competitive this year.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, Nick, how on last podcast you talked about one of the bad habits we need to see Webb fix, and that was what you called burping the baby. Which is essentially just patting the football down, which correct? It's basically overly patting the football.
Yeah, you got to look on tape, but what ends up happening is it's right before he's about to throw, he takes his left hand, and his left hand's not on the ball, and he taps the ball. And what that does against a lot of secondaries, it's a tip. It's like a tell in poker that he's going to throw it. So guys will break on that.
Exactly. And what I thought was so interesting. Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
What was so interesting about that is that they were asking Webb to break down his performance, and he said, when I was looking on tape, I kept patting the ball. I saw way too many instances of patting the ball. So kudos to you there, Nick, for pointing out something that you saw on tape that even Webb, when he went back on, wants to improve on, because he saw it as an issue as well. So we're hoping to see that improvement in this game. We need him to clean up these little things if he wants to hold on to this number 2 job. And just lastly, were there any other players you wanted to see? Because I'll throw one more name out there. I want to see Lorenzo Carter. Today at practice, Carter was getting individual attention from Connor Barwin. The outside linebacker has been injured since the preseason game, hasn't practiced since Connor Barwin. And after getting individual talk on one of the plays, Carter responded with back-to-back sacks on the next 2 full-team drills. So he's just a guy, I think, just oozing with potential. Like I said when the Giants draft was over, I think he's going to end up being the best pick per the value of where each player was selected in this draft class. I know everyone's like, what do you mean? He's going to be better than Barkley? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying for where they drafted each player. What are you looking forward to with Carter? And did you see anything that stood out in his first game? I know he didn't play that many snaps.
Yeah, he played a fair amount.
He played a decent amount, but I mean, we could have seen. But anyway, is there anything you thought you saw there?
Yeah, I think when you touched on the Barwin thing, yelling out to him and giving him some tips and stuff, I think this is going to be huge. It's one of the biggest reasons I like the Barwin signing. Actually, was for that development. But the reason why, it's not just because guys need to get better and he's going to help them get better. It's specifically for Carter. He had a great early part to his career at Georgia. I'm not saying he had a poor end, but he was kind of seen as a star that never really reached his potential in terms of statistics and sacks and everything. Part of the reason is, and this is not the whole reason, part of the reason is he kind of only has one move. He's got a speed move to the outside, and as a defensive end in the NFL, you want more. So that's where the veteran Barwin can really help. And so that's what I'm looking for. You're not looking for sacks in the preseason necessarily, other than him showing more moves as he takes on that right and left tackle. It was mostly the right tackle that I saw. He was coming from the left side in the preseason game. You see, he tried a long arm move, and my colleague at Inside the Pylon, Nick Filato, I'm sure he saw this. He breaks down defensive line stuff awesomely in terms of the move. And he tries a long arm move where he sticks his one arm into the tackle and tries to basically get some bend around the edge, and he kind of innocently fell very quickly. It's not knocking him. That's all this stuff is work in progress. He needs more reps doing that against different tackles with different techniques. And so all that type of stuff, I think, is going to benefit him with Barwin in his ear. And that's huge. And again, anyone to complement Vernon is a big deal in this pass rush, to generate it off the consistent 4 and 5 man rushes that they'll get. That's a big deal. So it's something that I just, again, maybe a wrinkle or two, his ability to maybe come inside as the game progresses, all inside rush, those types of things are huge for his career.
No doubt, Nick. No doubt. And again, one of the main things I'll just add before we wrap this up is that I think the Giants will finally actually put a little bit of a game plan together for this game. They really didn't do much on offense last week. They had 11 plays, like we talked about with that first-team offense. Nothing interesting. No design screens or design routes for Ingram or Barkley. So I think we'll finally see that in this game, and you're going to see that the offense can move the ball a little bit better than they did last game. So I'm definitely excited to see that. Anyway, Nick, is there anything else you wanted to throw out there before we wrap this up?
No, not to get the soundbite in for the SEO, but we did see with the third team with Lauletta and RPO, which is not like the greatest thing in the world, but I think it's interesting to see kind of immediately. It was a super basic RPO. I believe it was mid-zone coupled with bubble, and it was a simple pre-snap read, but it's something that to me is Shula helping out the overall playbook. And again, like you said, you're not going to see a lot of it, but just the fact that it was in already, that to me is a big indication, or will be a big indication to continue to watch to see as they do that. And maybe it doesn't happen with Eli as much as the second and third team guys, but it's there and it's going to be installed. So something I'll be watching it with well.
Definitely interesting note. I didn't catch that myself, so interesting. Giants mixing some RPO. Anyway, you can always count on Nick to drop a nice fun tidbit at the end there. But guys, we're going to wrap this up now. We're going to be adding some more things to this podcast as we move forward. Obviously, in the season, we've got big plans, but we're going to keep trying to do some interviews with some of the writers and reporters covering the different teams before the matchups, and we're going to start working in a mailbag section of the podcast at the end where we get to your questions, and we'll touch more on that during this next week. But on that note, I'm signing off right now. For Dan Schneider, this is Nick Turchin, and as always, go Giants.